Okay, so this is a message for the too far right Torah movement, and hopefully one of you will have ears to hear instead of being these evil shepherds from Ezekiel 34 who are actually scattering the flock and not actually out looking for them, but only feeding yourselves, okay? Whilst all these poor people are being scattered from all the high mountains and all the high hills by these wicked Jeremiah 23 pastors, which are telling them they once saved, always saved with this corrupt communication which they're preaching, okay? Which is officially what you got now because you're trying to beat people over the head with Paleo Hebrew and all of these things, even though you're told in Zephaniah chapter 3, after Jehovah has poured his fiery indignation upon on these nations, then he's going to restore to the people a pure language in the second Exodus, just like Hosea chapter 2 tells you, when he takes the name of Baal out of their mouth, okay? And you are warned in there, in that same scripture, that you were a bunch of evening wolves who know not the bone to the morrow, talking about that Passover because you're too busy doing God's feast in a profane land, rather than out looking for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, who are actually going to have ears to hear, and they're not going to listen to these wicked hirelings in the churches who are making merchandise of them. So the lost sheep of the house of Israel are going to actually have ears to hear, and you was called to become them Ezekiel 2, 3 and 33 watchmen and actually watch over the house of Israel, which means you be that faithful and wise servant who actually receives the meat in due season, so you can go out and feed the household. But if you be the one in Matthew 18, that evil servant who was forgiven that debt, which is the punishment of that sacrificial law, just like Isaiah 61 tells you, Yeshua was coming to forgive because it was only added there for transgression until the seed should come, like Galatians 3:19 tells you. So if you continue to do that, it does warn you in that chapter, telling you you're going to be casted over to the tormentors. What that means is you're going to go into great tribulation and be beaten with many stripes because you knew to do the Lord's will, but you turned away from that holy commandment which was delivered unto you, which is, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And what that mercy is, for you to go out and love your neighbor as yourself and not cause violence to the kingdom of heaven by beating them over the head with that sacrificial law. But you were supposed to be that unjust steward who realized he was wasting his goods, meaning he scattered the flock, being them evil shepherds who wasn't looking for the sheep, and then quickly go out and write a check for half, meaning you were supposed to teach these people is all they got to do is keep the 10 commandments and eat clean, and then keep that elevated commandment, which Yeshua was prophesied to come and do in Isaiah 42, which is to love your neighbor as yourself, which was always in the sacrificial law. But just because the Jews would rather make merchandise out of the house of Israel, they was allowing them to break the 10 commandments of God and not actually doing that commandment. And then, which is sharply rebuking the sin out of the church, which is actually the worthy weights to Jehovah, which is judgment, mercy, and faith, just like he tells you in Matthew 23, and not doing all these outwards appearances of broidering your garments and your phylacteries and all of these things, which is the sacrificial law, because that was only there for the knowledge of sin, to remind these people never to break the 10 commandments again. But now you're supposed to be the reminder to them when you go out and love them as yourself, fulfilling the royal law, when you sharply rebuke them, letting your conversation always be with grace seasoned with salt, which is the worthy sacrifice to Jehovah, because you are told in Deuteronomy 12 and 16, you're not supposed to do that which is right in your own eyes, but you're supposed to seek unto his habitation where he placed his name forever and actually do his feast there, and then he's going to accept you, because you are warned these ones who are actually mourning for Zion with this poor and contrite spirit in Isaiah 66, offering up that worthy sacrifice, these are the people the wrath of God is not appointed to, just like Paul tells you in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, because they're not these Isaiah 56 dumb dog watchmen who are sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber, because he does tell you in that scripture, those who are sleeping the night. You people who are keeping this polluted Sabbath from evening to evening, even though you're told you're supposed to be children of the light, knowing the day begins at dawn, because that's a more sure word of prophecy which you have. But because you've turned away from that holy commandment which is delivered to you, and you've started to return and eat and drink with the drunkards, even though you was the many called, but only a few choose to do the work. That's what it says in the original Hebrew. So because only a few choose to do the work, you turn away from that holy commandment which was delivered unto you and get choked out by the briars and thorns. And then the true proverb has come true: the dog has returned to his own vomit. And that's why it tells you in Isaiah 28 that all tables are full of vomit and filthiness, so that there is no place clean, because this is supposed to be the times of refreshing, but you would not hear and you would not go and turn the battle to the gate. And because you turn away from that commandment which is delivered to you, you become oppressed and broken in judgment. And by default, just like it tells you in Hosea chapter 8, you go and start doing God's feasts in a profane land and forgetting the great things of his law, which is to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself, which is to keep the 10 commandments, teach your children to do the same, and then go out and love your neighbor as yourself, which is teaching them to keep the 10 commandments just like you do to your children, and for them children to be obedient to that commandment, which is how they honor their father and their mother. So because you start doing God's feast in a profane land and you have the balances of deceit in your hand and you think you're rich, just like Hosea chapter 12 tells you, you're now going to go into great tribulation where you can be of him gold tried in the fire, like Revelation chapter 3 tells you, because you're only lukewarm. Because you was told in Colossians chapter 4, which that book of Colossians is being told to be read to the church of Laodicea. It actually tells you in Colossians chapter 4, you're always supposed to let your conversation be with grace seasoned with salt, which grace, according to Titus chapter 2, is divine influence upon your heart to obey the righteousness of God, which is the 10 commandments, and eat clean. But because you've lost that saltiness, just like Yeshua tells you in Matthew chapter 5, because you haven't got that poor and contrite spirit anymore, who's trembling at Jehovah's word, just like David did in Psalm 51, knowing he doesn't want burnt offerings and sacrifices, but he wants you to go out and find his people and look for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So because you've gone and lost that saltiness, just like Yeshua tells you in Matthew chapter 5, you're good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden underfoot, quoting to Isaiah 28, talking about when the devil is cast down in the sixth seal in a springtime event, you're going to be trodden down by it because you wasn't freaking watching, just like he warned you to do by strengthening that which remains. So what you need to do now, please, you people who are on the too far right, is stop doing God's feast in a profane land, stop beating people over the head with the sacrificial law, and be these unjust stewards who quickly write a check for half before you find yourself in great tribulation and you can't save your family or anything like that. Then you can only save yourselves.